Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 336 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling it Greece and Spain. So, I have been putting out, for the last 3 weeks, we've been putting out compilations of previous episodes. And the reason I do that is because I have to, basically. I'm pretty good about actually, getting the writing done, assuming I have the time. But in this case, I was out of town, so to speak. So what happened? So my wife, my mom, and I all went on a trip together. We did a similar trip in some ways last year where we went to Ireland and France. This time it was Greece and Spain, although really it was around Barcelona only for Spain. The reason for that is when we were first planning the trip, and this was months ago, we were also going to include a few days in Egypt to see the pyramids and so on. And we even paid for part of it, unfortunately, because as we got closer to it, it became more and more apparent that things were heating up. We actually canceled it even before the big blow up in Gaza and so on. But because if you like the U.S. State Department and the Canadian State Departments, they have like different levels of they have like danger levels essentially. And the Egypt one had been creeping up, and it actually got up to the level that was right before the level where they just don't recommend that you go at all. That was for the U.S. Also, Canada was having a bit of a kerfuffle with Egypt, and were basically making it so that Canadian citizens weren't able to get any sort of automatic visa to enter, even as just a tourist, which is what we would be doing. You would have to like go there and then like get in line and sign up for it. It just wasn't going to work out. So yeah, so we picked up my mom. She lives in the Denver area. And then we headed out. Went to Greece for a week. And basically what we did is we had a little bit of time before and a little bit of time after, but most of the tour of the trip was just a big tour of Greece. It was really, really well done. We had a tour leader named Stefania, and she really knew her stuff. She'd been doing tour leading for quite a while. She also, back in college, had been a history. Had studied history, Greek history specifically, which is perfect because that's the main thing of where we went. There were a few things that were sort of post classical Hellenistic Greek areas as well. A few sort of Byzantine, Ottoman, that sort of thing like that, but the main attraction and the thing that I really liked best was all of the classical Greek sites. So we started in Athens, and we got to see the Acropolis and some other places as well. The Acropolis is really, really remarkable. It was really interesting to stand there where so much history had happened, and if you just look out, and even in the ancient period, the Acropolis was the center, the omphalos, means the navel or the center of Athens, and it still is today. Athens grew up all around the Acropolis, so when you go up there, anywhere you look is just, you see like this sea of buildings, of Athenian buildings, modern Athenian buildings. And yeah, so it was really great to see that. We also saw Olympia, where the ancient Olympics were held. One of the interesting things about that is that it's also where the Olympic torch is lit. So what they do is, assuming it's not raining on the day of the ceremony, which most of the time it's not. It's very dry in Greece for the most part. It's especially where it is, and assuming it's sunny, then they have like this bronze sort of bell-shaped device, and it was used even in ancient times, and it basically just focuses the sunlight, and you know. Because it's shaped like a bell, there's a little point in the middle where it gets extremely hot because the sunlight is all being focused on it, and they light the torch there, and then it heads out to wherever that year's Olympics is from there, which was really cool. And it was also just interesting to see the the ancient stadiums and so on. We also saw some very interesting old ancient theaters as well. We also saw the Oracle. So we went to Delphi and saw where the Oracle was, which was really cool. It's a very historic place as well. And of course, it's all in ruins now, unfortunately. We're talking about over 2,000 years ago. Well, a little less than 2,000 years ago for the sort of the end of the period. A lot of these Grecian, sort of Hellenistic, places were sort of were in use until, and then Greece was taken over by Rome, and then but it really didn't change anything because the Romans loved the Greek culture, and they basically believed in all the same gods. They had different names for them, that they had the same pantheon of gods. So the Romans adored Greek culture, and so the Olympics kept happening, and the Oracle was still consulted, and all that sort of thing was still happening until Rome became Christian, and then a lot of these old polytheistic religious places were basically no longer allowed. And in some cases they actually destroyed, they actually pulled down and took a lot of the the statues, and sort of the more expensive and mobile things were taken down, even in ancient times, stolen by the Romans or by other people who conquered Greece for whatever, at a particular period of time. But sometimes the ancient Christians actually pulled down the actual buildings as well. So some of them didn't really survive that long, but a lot of them did, because they if there wasn't, if it was out in the middle of nowhere, some of these places, they just weren't very nearby, so they didn't necessarily get destroyed right away. But over 2,000 years, things happen. There's a fair bit of there's actually a number of earthquakes that have happened in Greece over the centuries. It's fairly geologically active. There's also, and sometimes buildings would get taken down for the stone. They essentially just use the stone to make other things, to make walls, to make castles, to make churches, stuff like that, over the centuries. But there's still enough there, and hearing about it and being in those places just was really, really, really interesting to me. And my wife and my mom also really enjoyed that as well. I also must say that the Greek food is wonderful. We had a hard time getting good wine, or at least wine that we liked. We went actually to a winery, and that was actually the place where we enjoyed the wine the most. But mostly we kind of started sticking to beer just because we didn't like the wine very much. But the food is amazing. They always, it's not very expensive. They give you lots of it. Just wonderful olives and, seasoned meats, and the tomatoes there are so good. This is out of season, we're talking November, and their out of season November tomatoes were better than high summer tomatoes here in the United States. It's so good. And got to try a lot of foods that I had never tried before. Enjoyed some ouzo, which was really good. In fact, we bought a bottle to drink later on. And by the way, don't freeze your ouzo. We accidentally froze the ouzo. I didn't think it would freeze because I put it in the freezer for a little bit, just because it doesn't matter why. Anyway, I did. And it froze it, and it actually changed the flavor of it. So if you ever get a bottle of ouzo, it's okay to drink a glass and put a little ice in it to cool it down, but don't actually chill the bottle all the way to freezing. It's not good for it, as it turns out, and I had no idea. So But anyways, Greece was amazing. Then we went, like I said, we had canceled the Egyptian tour because it was heating up at that time. This is like, again, even before the Gaza Strip thing happened, which expanded our time in Barcelona. So the reason we stayed in the Barcelona area is because originally we were only going to be there a couple of days. So we had sort of started to make some plans and so on. Once we expanded it, we did look around to see if there was any sort of pan-Spanish tour, but unfortunately in November, especially as late as November this was, because it was even after the Greek, we were on the last Greek tour for the season, with the one that Stefania was doing. And then her company like shuts down for a few months and then starts up, I don't know when, maybe April or something like that. But anyway, so we looked for a Spanish multi-day tour to take us maybe all throughout Spain, because we had the time. But it just wasn't working. So we found some day tours, and those were good. And then we spent some other time just touring on our own. So for Barcelona, we did like the bus tour, because you have one of those hop on hop off bus tours. We did those, saw a lot of great things in Barcelona itself. But then for the day tours, we did Montserrat, which is just sort of this mountain just north of, I think it's north of Barcelona, and it has like a big religious thing up there, and it's all ancient, has some great views and some beautiful old buildings and so on. The Spanish stuff is, even though Barcelona was founded during the Second Punic War, which is pretty old, that's like a couple centuries BC, so kind of the same period as some of the Grecian stuff. But unlike the Grecian stuff, which many of the things either, like the Acropolis is up on top of a hill, and it was sort of considered, sort of historically important, even, it has been for centuries, so it's semi-protected, even though it got blown up at one point. And, the Acropolis is in the middle of nowhere, the Olympus things is in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of stuff that, that is still there that didn't get built over. But unfortunately with Barcelona, yes, it's that old, but all of the ancient Roman stuff has just been built over, because it's been continually occupied since those times. It wasn't founded by the Romans; it was founded by their opponents in the Punic Wars. But then Rome won, and they had Spain. They didn't call it Spain at that time, but anyway. So there's not a lot of like actual like Roman era stuff there, but there's some really cool post-Roman stuff, which was really nice. And so we saw that. We went up to Figueres, which is where the Dali Museum was, and we spent some time there in the Dali Museum. Really, really interesting, I found. Interestingly, and then we spent a lot of time, so those were a couple of day trips, and then we spent a lot of times like looking at the Barcelonian museums, because there's some wonderful museums in Barcelona, really, really impressive, and that includes the Gaudí, the cathedral of Gaudí. It's called the Sacred Family, the Familia, and that was really interesting. And it was also interesting because that made two places where the artist had both designed the place and then been buried in the place. So Dali is actually buried in his museum in Figueres, and you actually walk right over his tomb, which is unusual. Like usually, tombs are sort of like put up in ways that people look at it, but they're not allowed to like go walk over it or anything. But the Dali Museum, like his burial place is right there, and it's kind of like this almost like theater sort of feeling place right in the middle of the museum. And there's a regular floor, and then in the middle is like a metal area, and his body is underneath there, and he's right in his museum, Dali Museum. Really interesting. A lot of great art there as well, of course. But the interesting thing, like I say, is also Gaudi is in the Familia. It's in the cathedral. He actually has a tomb down there, and and you see his tomb too. So, we actually saw two different places which is kind of an unusual thing in the world, and yet two of them are right around Barcelona, because Figueres is only like it's like an hour and a half away drive. It's very close. Yeah, so there's two places where like famous artists like designed a place, had it built during their lifetime, and actually were buried underneath it. Of course, the Gaudi has been being built for like a long time now, well over a century, and I think it's closer to two. And I think Dali's museum, well, it started out as a theater, and then he transformed it into the museum, and then he was buried there. So I'm not sure the exact timeline on that, but anyway, very interesting. Both well worth seeing. If you do see the Gaudi Sacra Familia Cathedral, try to see it in like the afternoon or maybe the morning. Don't do it at noon, and don't do it when like the sun's gone down. Like it was because it was almost winter. We only had a certain amount of daylight, and we went there at 4. But it was perfect because it was shortly before the sun went down. Fortunately, it wasn't cloudy, and the stained glass windows just explode with light at that time of day. It's really gorgeous. So definitely do it like that. Like go. Hopefully, you can't always control the weather, but try to see it either in the afternoon or in the morning, but not kind of midday. And yeah. We also saw several art museums. We saw the Picasso Museum. We saw several modern art museums as well. Really, really interesting stuff. Well worth doing. So I am back in town. Had a wonderful time. We actually came back a few days before Thanksgiving to Denver, and then spent the time with my sister and my mom. My mom lives with my sister, so lived with their family, and got to see my nephew play tennis and spend time with Steph and Bryn, and it was great. Had a wonderful Thanksgiving meal and all that sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. Quite a wonderful trip. Definitely recommend Barcelona. I recommend Greece. The food is amazing in Greece. The food was good in Spain, but it was amazing in Greece. And I wasn't the only one. We ended up all feeling the same way about that. But definitely, they're definitely both worth checking out for sure. Very interesting historic places to go. Both of them, tons of natural beauty. And I would recommend also going at the sort of time we did, because it's a lot less crowded if you can avoid like the summer crowds, because that's when people tend to travel, because kids are out of school and blah blah blah. But also the weather is great, because I live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. It's not particularly hot here, and it was roughly like as hot there as it is here, like in sort of like almost midsummer. Like it was still way warmer there than it would have been like in like August or September for the most part here in the Pacific Northwest. So the weather was just gorgeous because of that. It was perfect, and we really appreciated that as well. Hardly any rain, although it can be wetter there than it was this year. They're having a bit of a dry spell at the moment in both places, both Greece and Spain. The weather's been very crazy if you follow the news at all. Fortunately, the recent there was no, like, where we were going, there just wasn't any I didn't see any evidence of like the recent floods in Greece, because Greece had some pretty nasty floods just a couple of months ago, and but apparently it didn't affect the sort of places where we were going, which tended to be up a little higher and tended to be that sort of thing, so a little more remote, but not where it was getting blown away by the weather, which is good. So anyway, I am back. We only got back a couple days ago, and I am still completely like shagged out. I'm really tired, and it's all those many hours of hour, of time change, the jet lag and so on. And I'm hoping, so I knew because we just got back 2 days ago that I was not going to have time to do a whole week's worth of writing or anything for the next episode, but I am planning on starting writing either later today or tomorrow, and getting going on for the next episode. So we'll get back to the story, and thank you for listening. Definitely check out those countries if you ever get a chance. I would say do the same thing we did and either pick before or after the sort of the height of the summer season, because the weather was perfect for us. It could rain there, but it wouldn't have been a big deal if it rained a little more than it did. And it definitely, like, the temperature is a lot better, and it wasn't crowded, like almost, and it was still busy. There's a few places where it was still busy, like the Acropolis and the Acropolis Museum were still fairly full. But I can't imagine how much more crowded it would have been, like at the height of the summer. So definitely, if you ever get a chance, check those out. They're amazing. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Mastodon. And thanks for listening. Words of Music, copyright 2023. Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Thank you very much.